Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. You're free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons, and feel free to comment below. And I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released, and feel free to share these videos as much as you would like. Today is a Friday video, and I'm answering comments, and nearly all the comments this week came as a result of my Bible Contradictions video on Monday. I knew that would happen. It's kind of one of those things that it's a topic that everybody likes to talk about. And so, that's kind of just going to be the way it is. So there's a lot of stuff on here going back quite a ways 3 days ago. I didn't have too many comments on anything else other than my week 32 video. Some people were very thankful of addressing the topic of depression and some of the other issues I have. But when I got to my Bible Contradiction video, I have a number of comments. Eric Coleman makes the comment, I like this video, thank you. I wonder if more people actually reread the Bible and had a good understanding of it, would they be more skeptical? It seems like a lot of Christians don't read the Bible or ignore large parts of it, like the Old Testament, without questioning anything. Here's a little fun fact for you. I have discovered, and I discovered as a Christian, that atheists often know the Bible better than their Christian counterparts. And there has been many surveys that prove that. I remember one time where there was a survey given to Christians about the biblical stories, and it was like 50% of them didn't know basic stories that they would have heard in Sunday school. They didn't know the details, and so on and so forth. That's not unusual. When you just believe something, you very rarely look at it. When you're skeptical of something, you take a little closer look at it. I was a very skeptical person all my life, and so that's kind of where I go with things, and that's kind of where things, just sit for me. I think I've made a video about how I beat the living crap out of ideas, and I always have. But yeah, I have discovered that majorly so that many Christians are very ignorant of what's in the Bible. And I think if a lot of more of them knew what was in the Bible, they wouldn't be Christians. They've been taught a lot of things. Moonplug, I had a conversation yesterday with a Christian friend of mine and explained how I deconstructed my faith. It was almost like she didn't get it. She kept saying, shouldn't she be worrying and trust God? And she proceeds to tell me how God speaks to her through Scripture in her life. Yeah, I get that too. It's almost like when you're born again, you have this Christian glasses that prevent you from acknowledging the contradictions in the Bible. Yeah, you're kind of leading me in, and you're stealing my thunder with another commenter here in a bit. But yes, one of the things that happens, and I used to do this as a Christian education pastor, just for the commenter to come that I'm going to address that's kind of came hard against my Bible Christian video with multiple comments. Just so you're aware, I have degrees in Bible and theology. I've studied the Bible since I was 12, at least, if not sooner. I grew up in Sunday school. I grew up in church. I heard tons and thousands of messages on all kinds of things. I'm not just a believer that became an atheist. I am a Christian pastor and scholar that became an atheist. I was a longtime Christian, a longtime pastor. I have degrees in Bible and theology, and yeah, after a while, I just had to be honest and say this is bullshit. Now, that may offend you if you're a Christian out there, but the contradictions of the Bible are very real. You can train yourself to think. I mean, if you're constantly told since the time you're a little kid, and this is the real insidiousness of religion, in my opinion now. You don't really give your kids a chance to make up their mind. You say, well, I'll teach them the truth and then they can make their mind up about it later. That's not what you're doing. You're teaching them your definition of truth, and they don't really have a choice about it, okay? And when they get older, they're either going to accept it or they're not. Okay, and I remember dealing with parents that were mortified that their kids walked away from the faith. But now that I look at it, it says, well, when you're so hardcore and you don't really present the real side of things, then if you're not doing multiple sides of the issue, if you're not looking at multiple faiths, you're really not doing that. What you're doing is indoctrinating. And if you keep telling a kid, the Bible's inerrant, it doesn't have any errors, if you see something that looks like an error, it just means you don't understand it. That's a very cult-like statement. Okay, if a cult leader says, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, it just means that you're the one with the problem. Okay, I'm not the one with the problem. I'm not the one not communicating effectively. I'm communicating effectively. I have the truth, and you're just not interpreting it right. There is no difference between that statement and saying the Bible is the authority. It has no errors. It's inspired by God. And, every single supposed contradiction has a real rational explanation for it. If you say that all of your life, and I did for the first 25, 30 years of my life in Christianity, probably the first 20 for sure, up until the time I got out of seminary. So I was about 26-ish, and I'd been in church since I was 4. So when you stopping saying that mantra, see, because if you keep training your mind that way, psychology is a very interesting science, because if you keep saying the same thing over and over again, eventually you believe it regardless of whether it's true or not. And if you're constantly saying that every single contradiction has a rational explanation all your life, yeah, that Christian friend is going to have these Christian, no, there are no contradictions in the Bible glasses. Okay, and even if you show them and demonstrate to them that there's a contradiction in the Bible or something in the Bible makes absolutely no sense, no matter how you look at it, they're not going to see that. I literally once handed a Bible to a person telling them that there was a passage in the Bible that said God did a certain thing. No, that's not in the Bible. And I literally handed them the Bible and showed them the place where it was and had them read it aloud. Like, that's not really in there. If you can train your mind to believe all kinds of shit, okay? And because of that, you have to watch yourself. I mean, as an atheist, I'm constantly challenging myself with other atheists. I'm constantly challenging myself with Christians. I don't mind this commenter that's coming up. I'm just, I'm about to inform them that they're not dealing with some simple believer that became an atheist. They're dealing with somebody who was a big player as far as intellectualism in the Christian world, as far as that goes. And after a while, you just have to be intellectually honest and say, no, the Bible has contradictions. There's open contradiction in the Bible, and I'm going to get to one of them as an example in a minute. But that's kind of because the first one makes to moon plug, maybe the atheist classes prevent acknowledging that the supposed contradiction can be logically and rationally demonstratively explained. So your basic defense is that not to acknowledge the possibility that you have Christian glasses, but you're going to accuse your opponent of having atheist glasses. Well, that's not an argument. You have to demonstrate, you're going to make the statement that all of these contradictions have a rational explanation, then you have to prove that with every contradiction. If you're going to I'm sorry, Sonny Delight, you are the one as a Christian making the most audacious claim. You are claiming A, that there is a God, B, that this God gives a shit about humanity. You're also making the claim that somehow he has a salvation message for you, that you can basically just, this is the way of salvation, and it's very clear, which I'm going to demonstrate in a moment, it's not. And that every supposed contradiction has an explanation. At last count, I remember hearing somebody who had documented all the contradictions in the Bible. It's over 10,000. You literally have to go through every single one of those contradictions and show why it's rationally not a contradiction. And all it takes, you see, you placed yourself in a very interesting bubble, because when you say All. When you say the word all, contradictions can be explained rationally. That means you have set yourself up that you can demonstrate, let's say there are 10,000 contradictions supposedly in the Bible, and you demonstrate that 999 of them are not contradictions, but one of them holds up as a contradiction. Then your statement, all contradiction, is false. That's the position you have placed in. And when you make a universal claim like that, you have to prove universality. I don't have to make that claim. See, all I have to do is demonstrate that there's one contradiction in the Bible, just one. And I don't have to do that. I spent 20 years trying to explain away contradictions in the Bible to fundamentalist believers who believed that the Bible was the inerrant, inspired word. And I ran out of explanations because eventually my explanation just became batshit crazy at times. I'm not trying to be rude, Sunny Delight, but you're fighting a tiger here because I've been down this road, okay? Because you bring up inspiring philosophy. I've listened to inspiring philosophy. He is very much like I was 10 years ago. He's also had a bunch of atheist YouTubers have done videos countering his videos and ate him for lunch. Okay? The biggest contradiction, you see, because it's not about just contradictions within the Bible. It's how the Bible contradicts reality. Okay? For instance, I'll give you a couple of for instances because these are big ones to me. Number one, when the Bible describes the earth, it describes it as a flat disk with a dome over top of it, sitting on pillars of the earth. That has been demonstrably proven by astronomy and everything else to be false. Unless you're some sort of flat earther, it has been demonstrably proven that that view, that cosmology that the Bible presents, not just in Genesis, but all through the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament, is demonstrably proven false. That is not the way the world works. So the Bible contradicts reality. It seems like if God created reality and the Bible, that they would be cohesive, that they would mesh together, but they don't. Let me give you another one. The fact that archaeology basically says that if the Exodus took place when conservatives think it takes place, they would literally be leaving Egypt to go to Egypt. Because at the time that Joshua is supposedly invading Canaan, and conquering the land, that is all Egypt and has been Egypt for 100 years. Egyptian controlled. There's not a multitude of tribes that they invaded and conquered at that time if Joshua invaded at that time. So the Bible contradicts archaeological reality. The point of the matter is the Bible, when I talk Bible contradictions, to me that's a very broad topic. And that's why how I'm going to answer one of your questions, which was, there must have been people, there's this idea of, here it is. Do men describe God in kind, or do they agree? Are their viewpoints of God different? Does the Bible contradict itself? It's not an issue of Bible contradictions necessarily. The Bible contradicting itself. It's the Bible contradicting reality. It's the Bible contradicting, what is feasible. The Bible contradicting just common sense morality, because Christians will make the claim that the Bible is a very moral. I'm sorry, I think genocide is an immoral act. And the Bible has God ordering genocide on a multiple. God commits genocide. He nearly kills the whole world. He literally kills everybody and then turns around and says, well, I love everybody. I'm sorry, when you kill somebody, that's a big, I don't love you. I don't care what you are, okay? If you love somebody, you want the best for them and you try to help them see the error of their ways and move them along. When God just straight up strikes people dead, he's admitting his incompetence, okay? I'm going to give you a theological contradiction. If God is omniscient and so knowing, and he's all-powerful, why does he have to kill people in the first place? Why doesn't he just come down knowing what would convince them of the truth and convince them, because he loves them and he doesn't want them to go to hell and he doesn't want them to be killed. The God of the Bible is contradictory. You can't have a loving God and a God that basically kills people arbitrarily just because he gets pissed off, because the Bible has God getting just pissed off and killing people. That's just true. And you don't have to like that. You make this comment also, Sonny Delight, about one key aspect you're missing is his love, but also his holiness. I was a holiness preacher, dude. I know all about holiness. Okay, when I was a Pentecostal, I was a holiness preacher. Okay, I taught second work of grace and third work of grace at times. That, the sanctifying work. So I would preach God's holiness on a regular basis. But God's holiness, it doesn't solve the problem, because when I talk about God's justice, that's a holiness issue. Out of his holiness flows his justice, is the way the theological mindset goes. If God is demonstrably proven to be unjust in the Bible by any standard of justice, then he's not holy. And just because God makes the claim to holiness and differentness in the Bible doesn't make it true. You have to prove that. And he's obviously not around to ask and prove it. It's never been proven. It's a certain, I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but you're making a lot of assertions yourself without proof. Now, you mentioned inspiring philosophy. I'm going to tell you, I've watched inspiring philosophy. I find his arguments very compelling if I was still a believer. He has a hard time, and what I mean by that, to me, he's like typical of most apologists. He's not trying to convince unbelievers to come to the faith. He's trying to convince the faithful to stay faithful. He's trying to say, oh, you have a rational belief to believe your stuff. Well, no, you really don't. But this will convince you if you want to hold on to your belief. And this is really the issue, isn't it? If you want to believe something, you'll do all kinds of mental gymnastics to keep your belief. Okay, that's why I say faith is not a virtue. In fact, I think it's a very dishonest position to hold. You're basically saying, I am going to trust and order my life according to something that I cannot prove. That's what faith is, by definition, by the biblical definition. Okay, it's trusting in something hoped for and evidence of things not seen. You literally are saying that you're going to put your trust in something that you cannot see and cannot prove. And that's a very dishonest position to take. You shouldn't be imposing things on other people or saying certain things are true if you can't prove them. Okay, and true things conform to reality. And the Bible does not conform to reality. It contradicts reality. Okay, well, I'm going to be really, yes. Do the Bible books contradict themselves? I want to give you an example of that. I was thinking about this today when I saw your comment earlier today. And I said, what is the best example of the Bible authors contradicting themselves? Where one takes one viewpoint and one takes another. And the best one I could come up with is Paul in Romans, when he says that faith is by salvation is by faith alone. And then James turns right around using the same story of Abraham sacrificing his son, saying that it works is, his faith was nothing unless his works proved his faith. He's literally saying, one is saying that faith alone saves you, and the other one says works has to be working with faith to save you. They are two contradictory ideas about faith and works. I know tons of ink have been spent trying to disappear this contradiction, but it hasn't done so. I spent a lot of time trying to get rid of that contradiction. And that's when you start going back and you just start to study how the books of the Bible got to be the books of the Bible. Well, this council met and they had this criteria of what constitutes. Okay. So God didn't come down from a mountain and tell us what books were in the Bible, did he? So a bunch of human beings got together and decided what the Bible was. Now, I want you to think about that. Well, they were just recognizing what was inspired. That's an unprovable statement. I mean, when you say the Bible is inspired, it's an unprovable statement, really. Inspired to who? That's a very subjective idea, inspiration. I'm sorry, inspiration is a very subjective idea. Okay, it's like some things inspire some people and some things don't inspire others. Well, it's God breathed. God had something to do with it. Prove that. You can't. Okay. Now, as far as contradictions in the Bible, that's one of them to me, because you have literally two men, two apostles, supposedly. I'm not sure about the authorship of James, quite honestly, but that basically take the same story of Abraham sacrificing his son, Isaac, and coming to drastically different theological conclusions that are completely polar opposites of each other. In the Bible, that is supposedly inerrant and non-contradictory. Sorry, it doesn't work. I'm sure you're going to give an explanation of how, well, actually, this is James's way of looking at it, and you're going to go through all these because you've told yourself the mantra over and over again that the Bible has no contradictions. The Bible has no contradictions. The Bible has no contradictions. And I want to let you know that all you've really done by saying that all the time is basically shown that you have developed and indoctrinated yourself with a bias. I'm going to be always open to seeing that a Bible contradiction isn't a Bible contradiction. In fact, I think Matt Dillahunty did this once, where he showed where a lot of atheists think something was a Bible contradiction and said, no, it's not. And he said it wasn't. And that's because Matt Dillahunty tends to be very honest intellectually. If he doesn't think something's a Bible contradiction, he'll flat out say it's not. And I think, as I recall, I remember hearing him talk about, I can't even remember what the biblical issue is, but I remember talking to him about it, thinking about it. I didn't talk to him, but I was thinking about it. And yeah, he's right. It's not a Bible contradiction. And you will see me in this series on Bible contradictions basically admitting sometimes that a lot of things, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do here. My next video is going to be what constitutes a contradiction. And I'm not going to talk about Bible contradictions. I'm going to talk about what a contradiction in and of itself is based on definition. And, and why it is a contradiction. Because I think that needs to be defined. What I'm doing here is basically saying, okay, if something is not contradictory, it should have the following elements, whatever those elements happen to be. I'm still looking into this, still studying this. And then when I get to the actual contradictions, I may go and find a list, just for jollies, of some atheists that's come up with contradictions, and I'm going to examine them to see if they're really contradictory. And I may come to the conclusion that a couple of them aren't contradictory, because I used to do that all the time. But I want you to understand that I have looked at all these contradictions, and I'm going to flat out tell you that some of the contradictions don't have a rational explanation. They're contradictions. They don't have rational, logical reasons. They're just the fact that the Bible is written by human beings. God had nothing to do with it, and because of that, they have different opinions about what God is, and some of those opinions are contradictory. And that's just true. Now, you can sit there and keep saying that mantra but that's just all it is. It's a mantra. In order to prove that statement, you have to examine every single one of the contradictions, and you have to prove that it's not a contradiction. If you fail even once, your premise is false. Your mantra is a fraud. I don't have to do that. All I have to do is show one Bible contradiction that can't be resolved. And, I have the advantage. Okay? And I've gone through this in my own life, in my 20 years of ministry, in my 40 years of being a Christian, in my many years of studying the Bible from the time I was a young person. And I'm going to tell you straight up that the Bible is a flawed, very human book, that God had nothing to do with it because there is no God. I'm 99.99% sure that there is no God. I guess I'm what Dawkins would call a 6 atheist, not a 7. If you can give me a good persuasive argument for the existence of God, go for it. But I've looked at them all, and I find them all to be flawed. I used to take the position of why I was a theist. Well, there's elements of truth to all of these. No, when you really take a good look at them, a lot of them beg the question. In fact, nearly every argument for the existence of God I've ever heard has some element of begging the question. They automatically assume God exists, so therefore God exists. And so, but as far as, you mentioned inspiring philosophy, I like inspiring philosophy. He seems to be a nice young person, nice person. I don't know much about him personally, but I find his arguments are ones that I would have made as an apologist when I did apologetics for a bit. And I'm going to tell you straight that most apologetics has nothing to do with actually addressing atheist questions. The reason I don't like to do Bible contradictions so much, and I may end up doing them just because this is kind of a hot button topic with people, is simply because it's a good way to discuss other things. For me, the issue is philosophical and theological, and the fact that, but the whole point of the discussion of my God versus the biblical God is simply pointing out that people create God in their own head. Your God, Sunny Delight, that you worship is something you created in your head. He doesn't really exist. He just is created in your head. And hopefully, someday I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, also known as the Rabid Atheist, saying goodbye and wishing you a good day and signing off.